The first time Yara shifted, she was 22 years old. Far too late. Impossibly late. An abomination. She had been a servant in a noble household her entire life, scrubbing floors and mending linens, believing herself as ordinary as the dust beneath her feet. Then the blood moon rose, and her bones shattered and reformed, and everything she thought she knew died screaming in the red light. They cast her out within the hour, chased her with silver and fire, called her tainted blood, cursed thing, monster. She ran for 3 days before the hunters cornered her in a ravine with no escape. That's when he appeared. The stranger moved like shadow-given form, dispatching her pursuers with terrifying ease. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, with dark hair and eyes like frozen silver that seemed to see straight through her. He introduced himself as Prince Torin of House Varen, second son of a minor lord. He offered her sanctuary, protection, a name no one would dare challenge. All she had to do was marry him. The conditions were clear. No love, no questions about his frequent absences, no expectations beyond the public performance of a political union. She would be his wife in name only, and in return, she would never be hunted again. Yara accepted because the alternative was death. What she didn't know was that Prince Torin of House Varen didn't exist. The man who saved her was the alpha king of the most powerful pack in the realm, hiding among his enemies to root out traitors. And her impossible, late-blooming wolf? It carried blood that hadn't existed for 300 years, a bloodline that could either save his kingdom or destroy it entirely. Neither of them understood how dangerous their arrangement would become. The forest wanted her dead. Yara could feel it in the way the branches clawed at her torn dress, the way roots seemed to rise from the earth to catch her bare feet. 3 days of running, and still they came. Still, the hunters crashed through the undergrowth behind her with their silver-tipped arrows and their howling dogs and their torches that turned the night into something from a nightmare. Her lungs burned. Her legs had stopped feeling like her own somewhere around dawn. The wound on her shoulder, where a silver blade had grazed her during the first night's chase, throbbed with a poison that made her vision swim. She wasn't going to make it. A root caught her ankle and Yara went down hard. The impact drove the air from her chest, left her gasping in the dirt and dead leaves, while the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Torchlight flickered between the trees. Voices shouted commands she couldn't quite make out. "Please," she whispered to no one. To the moon that had done this to her, to whatever god had decided that Yara of Millbrook, orphan servant and nobody, should have her entire existence ripped apart on an ordinary evening. "Please, I don't understand. I don't understand what I am." 3 nights ago, she had understood everything. She was a servant in Lord Aldrich's household. She scrubbed pots, mended sheets, stayed invisible. She was 22 years old, unmarried, unremarkable. She had a small room in the attic and dreams she never spoke aloud. Then the blood moon rose. Yara had been carrying linens to the washroom when the first pain hit. It started in her spine, a crackling sensation like lightning trapped beneath her skin. She dropped the basket, tried to scream. Her jaw wouldn't work right, was stretching, changing, filling with teeth that didn't belong to her. The transformation had taken less than a minute. It had felt like hours. Every bone breaking and reforming, every muscle tearing free and reweaving itself into something new. When it was over, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2, covered in silver-gray fur, her servant's dress in shreds around her. She didn't remember much after that. Just fragments, running through corridors, screaming faces, Lord Aldrich's voice thundering words she couldn't process. Silver. Abomination. Kill it before it infects the others. By the time she shifted back to human form, naked and shaking in the forest beyond the estate, they were already hunting her. Now the ravine walls rose on either side, steep and slick with moss. Yara dragged herself to her feet, stumbling toward the dead end she already knew was waiting. Her wolf pressed against her awareness, desperate to emerge, but she didn't know how to control it. The 3 times she'd shifted since that first night had been involuntary, triggered by fear or pain, leaving her more exhausted each time. The first hunter emerged from the trees. He was tall and broad, with a scar running down his face and a crossbow aimed directly at her heart. The bolt gleamed silver in the moonlight. "End of the line, tainted blood," he said. More hunters appeared behind him. 5, 7, 10. They spread out in a half-circle, blocking any hope of escape. Their dogs strained at their leashes, snarling. The torchlight made everything sharp and harsh. Yara's back hit the ravine wall. Cold stone. Nowhere left to run. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't know. I was human 3 days ago. I was normal." The scarred hunter laughed. "Human doesn't shift at 22, girl. Whatever you are, it isn't natural. Tainted blood gets purged. That's the law. Please." The word came out broken. "I don't even know what I did wrong." "You existed." He raised the crossbow. "That's enough." Yara closed her eyes. She thought of her small attic room, the dreams she'd never get to chase, the life that had been stolen from her by something she didn't understand. The crossbow string snapped, but the bolt never came. Instead, there was a sound like thunder, and the hunter's scream cut short, and when Yara opened her eyes, the world had changed. A man stood between her and the hunters. He'd appeared from nowhere, moving so fast she hadn't even heard his approach. The scarred hunter was on the ground, unconscious or dead, and the stranger held the broken crossbow in one hand like it weighed nothing. The other hunters had frozen, not with surprise, with terror. "You're hunting on my land," the stranger said, and his voice was winter itself. Cold. Absolute. Final. "Without my permission. Care to explain why?" The remaining hunters exchanged glances. One of them, braver or stupider than the rest, stepped forward. "My lord, the girl is tainted blood. She shifted at 22. The council has authorized her termination as a threat to—" "I didn't ask what she is." The stranger still hadn't turned around. Yara could only see his back, broad shoulders beneath a dark coat, black hair that fell past his collar. "I asked why you're on my land." Silence. Then, slowly, the hunters began to back away. Their dogs whimpered. The torches seemed dimmer somehow, as if even the fire was afraid. "Apologies, my lord," the brave one said, though his voice shook now. "We'll leave immediately. But the girl—" "The girl," the stranger said softly, "is no longer your concern." He turned, and Yara forgot how to breathe. He was beautiful the way a storm was beautiful, the way a wolf was beautiful in the moment before it struck. Frost-colored eyes that seemed to pierce straight through her. Sharp features that might have been carved from marble. Dark hair framing a face so striking it almost hurt to look at. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything in his entire life. The hunters were already retreating, stumbling over themselves in their haste to leave. Within moments, the torchlight faded between the trees, and Yara was alone with her rescuer. Her wolf stirred with restless energy. Not fear, exactly. Something else. Something she didn't have a name for. "You're injured," he said, stepping closer. His gaze dropped to her shoulder, to the silver wound that still wept sluggishly through her torn sleeve. "How long ago?" 3 days. Her voice came out hoarse. "The first night they found me?" He made a sound that might have been disapproval. "Silver poisoning. You should be dead." "I know." He tilted his head, studying her with those unsettling winter-gray eyes. Yara resisted the urge to back away. The ravine wall was still cold against her shoulders. There was nowhere to go. "You shifted at 22, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. That's impossible. I know that too. A ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but close. You know a great many impossible things about yourself. Yara swallowed hard. Who are you? He was quiet for a moment, watching her the way a predator watches something it hasn't yet decided to eat. Then, finally, he inclined his head in what might have been a bow. Prince Torin of House Varen, he said, second son of Lord Castian, heir to the Northern Territories. A prince. She was standing in front of a prince, covered in dirt and blood, wearing the remains of a servant's dress, with a wolf under her skin that she couldn't control. The absurdity of it made her want to laugh. Or cry. Perhaps both. My lord. She tried to curtsy, but her legs chose that moment to give out. He caught her before she hit the ground. His hands were surprisingly warm, his grip gentle despite the strength she could feel coiled beneath his skin. None of that, he said quietly. You can barely stand. I can stand. She tried to prove it. Failed. I just need a moment. You need a healer, and food, and sleep. He studied her face, something guarded in his expression. When did you last eat? Yara tried to remember. The memories blurred together. Running, hiding, drinking from streams when she found them. Had she eaten at all since that night? She couldn't recall. Her silence was answer enough. I see. He released her slowly, making sure she could balance against the ravine wall before stepping back. Can you walk if I support you? Why? The question came out sharper than she intended. Fear made her bold. Exhaustion made her reckless. Why would a prince help someone like me? You heard them. I'm tainted blood. I'm a threat. The council wants me dead. The council, he said, doesn't speak for everyone. That doesn't answer my question. No, he agreed. It doesn't. They stared at each other. Yara's wolf surged toward the surface, curious, drawn to something in this stranger that she couldn't identify. He smelled like pine and winter wind, like authority and secrets. I saved your life, he said finally. That means you belong to me now, at least until the debt is paid. Or would you prefer I leave you here to bleed out from silver poisoning? I don't belong to anyone. Surprise crossed his features, or perhaps amusement. The hunters would disagree, as would the council, your former lord, and every other wolf in this territory who smells tainted blood and sees a target. He paused. I'm the only one offering you a chance to survive, Yara of Millbrook. She went cold. How do you know my name? I know many things. He extended his hand. The question is, whether you trust me enough to find out what else I know, or whether you'd rather die here, alone and afraid, having never understood what you really are. Yara stared at his outstretched palm. Her options were non-existent. She could refuse, and he might leave her here to die. She could refuse, and the hunters might return. She could refuse, and the silver poisoning would kill her within days regardless. Or she could take a stranger's hand and hope he wasn't lying. She reached out. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain, and the air between them crackled with invisible current. Her wolf settled slightly, some tension she hadn't even recognized bleeding away. Good, he said softly. Now walk with me. They made it perhaps 20 steps before her legs failed entirely. She would have collapsed, but he was there, catching her, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. I can walk, she protested weakly, clearly. He began moving through the forest, carrying her with an ease that spoke of considerable strength. Save your pride for when you're not dying. Yara wanted to argue. She wanted to demand answers, explanations, reasons. But exhaustion was pulling at her consciousness, dragging her down into darkness, and the last thing she remembered was the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. When she woke, she was lying on silk sheets in a room larger than the entire servants' quarters of Lord Aldrich's estate. And Prince Torin was sitting in a chair by the window, watching her with those impenetrable, storm-colored eyes. Good, he said, You're awake. We need to talk. Yara pushed herself upright, wincing at the pull of bandages around her shoulder. Someone had cleaned her wounds, dressed her in a soft nightgown, and brushed the tangles from her hair. She felt more human than she had in days. Where am I? My estate. You've been unconscious for 2 days while the healers drew the silver from your blood. He stood, moving toward the bed with that predatory grace. You're surprisingly resilient for someone who shouldn't exist. I don't understand what that means. No, he agreed. You don't. But you will. He stopped at the foot of the bed, folding his arms across his chest. First, however, I have a proposition. What kind of proposition? His expression didn't change. His voice remained perfectly calm. And yet the atmosphere transformed, grew heavier, more charged. Marry me. The words hung between them like smoke. Yara stared at him, waiting for the twist, the explanation, the part where this made sense. It didn't come. You want to marry me? She said slowly. A servant, a tainted blood, someone the council has marked for death. Yes. We've known each other for 2 days, one of which I was unconscious. Also yes. You're a prince. I'm aware of my title. She pushed the silk sheets aside, swinging her legs over the edge of the bed. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet. Good. The cold helped her think, helped her remember that this was real, that she wasn't still dreaming in that ravine while her body gave out. Why? Torin was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost some of its cold precision, becoming something almost human. I need a wife, he said. My family has been pressuring me to take a mate for years. Political alliances, continuation of the bloodline, the usual concerns of nobility. He moved to the window, staring out at something she couldn't see. But I don't want a political wife. Someone who will ask questions about my absences, someone who will expect access to parts of my life that aren't available for sharing. Someone with connections and family who will interfere. And I have none of those things. No, you have nothing. He turned back to face her. No family, no connections, no expectations. You're a ghost, Yara. Someone who legally doesn't exist anymore. The council declared you terminated the moment Lord Aldrich reported your shift. The words should have hurt. Instead, they just felt hollow. She'd known, on some level, that her old life was over. Hearing it confirmed was almost a relief. So you want to marry a ghost? I want a wife who won't complicate my life. In return, I'll give you something no one else can. He took a step toward her. Protection. Status. A name that will make the council think twice before hunting you. Marry me, and you become untouchable. And love? The question slipped out before she could stop it. What about that? Pain shadowed his features, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. Love isn't part of this arrangement. I won't pretend otherwise. His voice softened slightly. I'm offering you safety, Yara. Comfort. Freedom from running. But I'm not offering my heart. That isn't available. Why not? Because it's already broken. He said it simply, without self-pity, as if stating a fact about the weather. I had a mate once. She's gone. I won't replace her. And I won't pretend that I can. This marriage would be purely practical. A performance for the public. Nothing more. Yara studied his face, searching for the lie. She'd learned to read people during her years as a servant, had learned that nobles especially said one thing while meaning another. But Torin's expression revealed nothing but the truth of what he'd said. He was offering her a cage, but it was a gilded cage, and the alternative was death. What would be expected of me? She asked quietly. Public appearances when necessary. Playing the role of my wife at court functions. Otherwise, your time is your own. He paused. I'll be away frequently on business. You won't need to explain my absences, and I won't explain them. That's part of the arrangement. And heirs? Most nobles expect their wives to produce children. A muscle feathered in his cheek. That would require a level of intimacy that isn't part of this contract. If an heir becomes necessary, we can discuss alternatives. But no, Yara, I won't be visiting your bedchamber. This marriage is in name only. In name only. The phrase echoed in her mind. A marriage without love, without intimacy, without any of the things that marriage was supposed to mean. Just protection in exchange for performance. A week ago, she would have refused. A week ago, she had dreams of something more, of finding love, of building a life, of mattering to someone. But that was before the blood moon, before her bones shattered and reformed, before she learned that everything she thought she knew about herself was a lie. If I refuse? She asked. Then you walk out that door and take your chances with the hunters. His voice held no threat, just simple fact. I won't stop you. I won't force you. But I also won't protect you if you refuse my offer. Yara closed her eyes. The beast inside her growled low, restless and uncertain. It should have been an impossible decision. Instead, it felt inevitable. Yes, she said. When she opened her eyes, Torin was watching her with a carefully blank expression. Yes, you'll marry me? Yes, I'll marry you. She stood, ignoring the weakness in her legs, and met his gaze directly. But I have conditions. His eyebrow rose slightly. You're in no position to negotiate. And yet, I'm negotiating. She lifted her chin. I want answers. About what I am. About why I shifted at 22 when everyone says that's impossible. You said you know things about me. I want to know them too. He considered this for a long moment. That's a fair request. I'll tell you what I can, when I can. Some things aren't mine to reveal yet. Yet? Yet, he confirmed. Is there anything else? One more thing. She took a breath. I want to learn to control my wolf. I've shifted 3 times since that first night, and I couldn't control any of them. If I'm going to survive in your world, I need to understand what I'm becoming. Approval crossed his face before the mask returned. That, he said quietly, I can promise. I'll train you myself. He extended his hand just as he had in the ravine. But this time it wasn't an offer of rescue. It was a contract, a binding. Yara took it. His grip was warm and firm, and when their hands touched, her wolf settled completely for the first time since her awakening. The restlessness faded, the fear quieted. In its place was something she didn't recognize. Belonging, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Then it's done, Torin said. We leave for my family's estate tomorrow. The wedding will take place within the week. He released her hand, stepping back toward the door. Rest now. The journey ahead is long, and you'll need your strength. He was almost to the door when Yara spoke again. Your family's estate, she said. Where is it exactly? Torin paused, his hand on the door frame. North, in the heart of the old territories. And House Varen? I've never heard of it. Few have. He didn't turn around. We prefer to keep our affairs private. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him. Yara sank back onto the bed, her mind spinning. Something was wrong. Something didn't fit. A second son of a minor lord didn't carry himself like that. Didn't command that kind of authority. Didn't make hunters run with a single look. And those servants who had tended her wounds, dressed her in silk, treated her like nobility instead of tainted blood. They had moved around her with a deference that seemed excessive for a guest of their master, almost like she was already their mistress, almost like they knew something she didn't. Yara lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling while questions churned through her exhausted mind. What had she agreed to? Who was Torin really? And why, beneath all the fear and uncertainty, did her wolf feel like it was finally home? Sleep pulled at her consciousness, dragging her down into darkness. But just before she surrendered to it, a final thought surfaced. She would find out the truth. Whatever it took. Whatever it cost. She would find out who Prince Torin of House Varen really was. The journey took 3 days. They traveled by carriage, then horseback, then carriage again as the roads grew narrower and the forests grew denser. Yara watched the landscape change through the window, the gentle hills of the lowlands giving way to something wilder. Ancient trees with trunks wider than houses. Mist that clung to the ground like a living thing. Mountains rising in the distance, their peaks lost in clouds. And wolves. She saw them everywhere as they traveled deeper into the old territories. Watching from the tree line. Running alongside the carriage in their shifted forms. Never approaching, never threatening, but always present. "Your family has many wolves in their service," she observed on the second day. Torin, seated across from her in the carriage, didn't look up from the documents he was reviewing. "We live in wolf territory. There are many packs in these mountains." "And they all answer to House Varen?" "They respect our position." He turned a page. "There's a difference." Yara wanted to press further, but something in his tone warned her off. She'd learned quickly that Torin gave answers in his own time, and pushing only made him retreat further into that cold, distant shell. Still, her wolf noticed things. The way every wolf they passed dipped their head slightly when the carriage rolled by. The way the servants at their rest stops moved with barely contained nervousness, their eyes constantly darting to Torin as if expecting commands. It wasn't respect. It was something more. Something deeper. Fear, she realized. They're afraid of him. On the third day, they arrived. The estate rose from the mist like something from a fever dream. It wasn't a noble's residence. It wasn't even a castle in the traditional sense. It was a fortress, sprawling and ancient, its walls carved directly into the mountainside. Towers pierced the low-hanging clouds. Banners snapped in the wind, bearing a symbol she didn't recognize, a crowned wolf against a field of black. "This is your family's estate?" Yara breathed. "This is Valdris," Torin said quietly. "Seat of the old kingdom, home of the true bloodlines." The carriage passed through gates that stood 3 times the height of a man. Guards lined the pathway, wolves in human form, and their eyes tracking the carriage's progress with unsettling intensity. And then they reached the courtyard. It was filled with people, hundreds of them. Nobles and servants, warriors and craftsmen, all gathered in the shadow of the great fortress, waiting. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. Torin stepped out first, turning to offer her his hand. Yara took it, letting him help her down onto the cobblestones. The moment her feet touched the ground, every wolf in the courtyard dropped to their knees. Not a casual bow, not the respectful nod of servants to a nobleman. This was total submission. Heads bowed to the stone, hands pressed flat against the earth. Hundreds of wolves, kneeling before them as if in the presence of something sacred. Yara stopped breathing. "Torin," she whispered, her voice shaking. "What is this?" He didn't answer immediately. When she turned to look at him, his expression had changed. The cold mask was gone. In its place was something raw, something ancient, and something that made her wolf want to drop to the ground alongside everyone else. "I told you a half-truth," he said quietly. "I am Torin of House Varen, but I'm not a second son. I'm not a minor prince." His winter-gray eyes met hers, and in them she saw centuries of power, of burden, of terrible lonely authority. "I am the Alpha King," he said, "and you, Yara of Millbrook, are about to become my queen." The world had stopped making sense. Yara stood frozen in the courtyard while hundreds of wolves remained on their knees before her. Before them. Before the man who had called himself a minor prince, and was apparently anything but. "Alpha King," she repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "You're the Alpha King." "Yes." "You lied to me." I told you a half-truth. Torin's voice remained calm, but something shifted in his frost-colored gaze. There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing. A murmur rippled through the kneeling crowd. Yara realized, distantly, that she was probably the first person in decades to speak to the Alpha King with anything less than absolute deference. She should be terrified. She should be groveling like everyone else. Instead, she was furious. You let me believe you were a second son, she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that only he could hear. A minor noble offering protection to a tainted blood. I agreed to marry you based on that understanding. And I'm still offering protection. He met her gaze steadily. The only thing that's changed is the scale. The scale. She laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. I thought I was becoming a nobleman's wife. Instead, I'm supposed to be, what? Queen of the Wolves? Of the entire realm? Yes. The simplicity of his answer stole her breath. Torin stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. I know this is overwhelming. I know I should have told you sooner. But there are reasons I couldn't, Yara. Reasons that will become clear in time. And I'm supposed to just trust you? After you've already proven you'll deceive me? I'm asking you to try. He held her gaze, and for the first time she saw something beneath the cold mask. Exhaustion, maybe. Or loneliness so deep it had calcified into something hard and permanent. Give me 1 week. Let me explain what I can. If you still want to leave after that, I won't stop you. You'd let me walk away? From being queen? I'd let you walk away from anything. His expression hardened. I told you this arrangement requires no love, no obligation beyond what you choose to give. That hasn't changed. Crown or no crown, you're still free to refuse. Yara studied his face, searching for the lie. She couldn't find one. The wolves were still kneeling. The wind was still blowing. The world was still waiting for her answer. 1 week, she said finally. But I want the truth. All of it. Relief washed over his features before the mask returned. Follow me, he said. We have much to discuss. The throne room of Valdris was unlike anything Yara had ever imagined. It was carved directly into the mountain, a vast cavern lit by crystals that glowed with their own inner light. The ceiling soared so high it vanished into shadow. Ancient banners lined the walls, some so faded their symbols had worn away entirely, and at the far end, on a dais of black stone, sat 2 thrones. The seat of the Alpha Kings, Torin said, watching her face as she took it all in. For 3,000 years, this is where the true rulers have held court. And the second throne? For the Alpha Queen. He paused. It's been empty for a very long time. Yara approached the dais slowly, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. Up close, she could see the craftsmanship of the thrones, wolves carved into every surface, their eyes set with gems that caught the crystal light. Your mate, she said quietly. The one you said was gone. Did she sit here? Silence. When she turned, Torin's face had gone carefully blank, but something in his eyes betrayed him. Pain, old and deep, and never quite healed. No, he said finally. She never had the chance. What happened to her? She was taken from me. The words came out flat, controlled. Before our bonding ceremony, before I could mark her, before any of it became official. Taken by whom? He didn't answer. Instead, he moved past her toward a door hidden in the shadows beside the dais. That's a story for another time. For now, there are more pressing matters. Yara wanted to push, but something in his posture warned her off. She followed him through the hidden door into a smaller chamber, this one furnished with maps and documents and the comfortable clutter of a working study. Your training begins tomorrow, Torin said, settling behind a massive desk. You'll need to learn to control your wolf before the wedding. The wedding is still happening? Unless you've changed your mind. He looked up at her. Have you? Yara considered the question. She was standing in the heart of an ancient kingdom, promised to the most powerful wolf in the realm, carrying a bloodline that apparently shouldn't exist. Nothing about this made sense. And yet, her wolf had been calm since they arrived. Not restless, not afraid, not pressing against her control the way it had since her awakening. For the first time in days, she felt almost peaceful. No, she said slowly. I haven't changed my mind. Good. He gestured to a chair across from him. Then sit. There are things you need to understand about what you are. The explanation took hours. Wolves, Torin told her, were born with their abilities. The shift came early, usually around puberty, sometimes younger, and was tied to bloodline and heritage. A wolf who hadn't shifted by 20 was considered a late bloomer. By 25, the potential was assumed to have died entirely. No one shifted at 22 with no warning, no heritage, and no explanation. Except, Torin said carefully, in one documented case. Yara leaned forward. What case? 300 years ago, there was a bloodline called the Werewolves. They were the first wolves, the originals. Their power was different from ours. Older, wilder, tied to the moon itself in ways that modern wolves can barely comprehend. What happened to them? They were destroyed. His expression darkened, hunted to extinction by those who feared what they represented. The last known Varys died before my grandfather was born. But you think I'm one of them? I think you carry their blood. He reached across the desk, taking her hand before she could react. His thumb pressed against her wrist, finding her pulse. The council calls it tainted blood because they don't understand what they're sensing. But I've studied the old texts. I've learned to recognize the signs. What signs? The late awakening. The silver eyes your wolf carries. I saw them in the ravine when you almost shifted. The way your presence makes other wolves uneasy. His grip tightened slightly. You're not tainted, Yara. You're something far more dangerous. Dangerous how? He released her hand, sitting back in his chair. The Varys weren't just the first wolves. They were the ones who created the others. Their blood was capable of awakening the wolf in anyone, of strengthening existing bloodlines, of healing wounds that should have been fatal. Healing wounds, Yara repeated slowly. Like silver poisoning? Like silver poisoning. He nodded. You should have died in that forest. Instead, you survived 3 days with silver in your blood. That shouldn't be possible, unless you carry Varys heritage. The implications crashed over her like a wave. That's why you saved me, she breathed. That's why you offered marriage, not because you needed a convenient wife, because you needed my blood. No. The word came out sharp, almost angry. I offered marriage because you needed protection and I could provide it. Your bloodline complicates things, yes, but it isn't why I chose you. Then why did you choose me? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its cold edge, because when you looked at me in that ravine, you weren't afraid. His eyes met hers. Everyone is afraid of me, Yara. Nobles, servants, warriors, even those who love me fear what I represent. But you stood there, cornered and dying, and you demanded answers instead of begging for your life. I was terrified. Perhaps, but you didn't show it. Warmth ghosted through his gaze. That kind of courage is rare, especially in my world. Yara didn't know what to say. The anger that had sustained her since the courtyard was fading, replaced by something more complicated. The training, she said finally. When does it start? Dawn. He rose from behind the desk. Get some rest. You'll need it. He was almost to the door when she spoke again. Torin. He paused, not turning. Thank you, she said quietly. For telling me the truth. Even the parts you didn't want to share. For a moment she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, so softly she almost missed it. Don't thank me yet. The truth gets harder from here. Then he was gone. The training was brutal. Yara had expected difficulty. What she got was something closer to torture. Hours of running until her lungs burned, of fighting in human form until her muscles screamed, of reaching for her wolf again and again while Torin watched with those shuttered winter eyes. Again, he said, as she collapsed to her knees for the third time that morning. You almost had it. I can't. She was gasping, sweat dripping down her face despite the mountain cold. I can't find it. Yes, you can. He crouched in front of her, close enough that she could see the individual shades of gray in his irises. The wolf isn't separate from you, Yara. It's not a beast you have to wrestle into submission. It's part of you. You're trying to control it when you should be merging with it. I don't know what that means. Then let me show you. Before she could respond, his hands cupped her face. The touch was gentle, his palms cool against her flushed skin. Her wolf surged forward immediately, not with fear or aggression, but with something else. Recognition. Close your eyes, Torin murmured. Feel the wolf inside you. Don't grab for it. Don't force it. Just feel. Yara closed her eyes. At first, there was nothing but her own racing heart, her own ragged breathing, and her own exhaustion. But slowly, gradually, she became aware of something else. A presence watching, waiting. I feel it, she whispered. Good. Now reach for it. Gently, like you're offering your hand to something wild. She did. And for the first time since her awakening, the wolf reached back. The shift came not as pain, but as relief. Like finally exhaling after holding her breath for too long. Her bones didn't shatter, they flowed. Her muscles didn't tear, they transformed. When she opened her eyes, the world was sharper, brighter, painted in 1,000 shades of gray. She stood on 4 legs, her silver-gray fur rippling in the wind. Torin was smiling. Actually smiling, the expression transforming his face into something almost warm. There you are, he said softly. I was beginning to wonder when you'd stop fighting yourself. Yara wanted to respond, but her wolf form didn't have words. Instead, she stepped forward, pressing her muzzle against his chest in a gesture that felt instinctive. His hand came up to stroke the fur between her ears. The touch sent shivers down her spine. Now shift back, he said. Control goes both ways. It took 3 attempts, but she managed. When she stood before him again in human form, her clothes reformed around her, a gift of wolf magic that she hadn't known she possessed. How do you feel? Torin asked. Different. She looked down at her hands, half expecting them to be changed somehow. Like something that was broken finally got fixed. That's the Varys blood. His voice was thoughtful. You're coming into your heritage. Once you've fully awakened, your abilities will grow. What kind of abilities? We'll find out together. Days turned into a week. Then 2. The training continued, but it changed as Yara grew more comfortable with her wolf. They ran together through the mountain forests, she in wolf form, he matching her pace with an ease that should have been impossible for a human body. They sparred in the training yards while curious wolves watched from the shadows. They spent long evenings in his study, poring over ancient texts about the Varys bloodline. Somewhere in that time, an invisible current began flowing between them. Yara couldn't pinpoint when it started. Maybe it was the morning he caught her before she fell during a difficult training exercise, his arms wrapping around her with a protectiveness that seemed to surprise them both. Maybe it was the evening she found him standing alone in the throne room, staring at the empty queen's throne with an expression of such profound loneliness that it made her chest ache. Maybe it was the night of the storm. Thunder crashed through the mountains, shaking the fortress to its foundations. Yara, unable to sleep, had wandered to the library seeking distraction. She found Torin there instead, standing by the window, watching lightning split the sky. You should be resting, he said without turning. So should you. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I don't sleep much. Never have. Why not? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, nightmares. The single word held more pain than she'd heard from him since they met. Yara moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. About your mate? She asked softly. The one who was taken? His shoulders tensed. Among other things. Tell me. Yara, you said you'd give me the truth. She stopped beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body despite his usual cold demeanor. I'm asking for it now. Lightning flashed. In the brief illumination, she saw his face clearly, the exhaustion carved into his features, the old grief that never quite faded, the loneliness of a king who had been alone too long. Her name was Senna, he said finally. We were young, barely more than children. The bonding was arranged by our families, political, like most royal matches, but we grew to love each other anyway. What happened? A faction within my court opposed the union. They believed the prophecy. What prophecy? His eyes met hers, and the intensity there made ice slide through her veins. There's an ancient text, older than the kingdom itself. It speaks of a wolf who will rise in a time of darkness, a wolf who will either save the Alpha bloodline or destroy it completely. He paused. Senna showed signs of Varys heritage, subtle ones, not like yours, but enough to make certain wolves nervous. Yara's pulse quickened. They killed her because of a prophecy? They tried to kill her. They succeeded in taking her from me. His voice had gone flat, controlled in that way she now recognized as barely contained grief. By the time I found where they were holding her, it was too late. She died in my arms. Torrin. I destroyed them. The words came out cold and hard. Every wolf who had a hand in her death, every conspirator, every traitor. I burned their houses and salted the earth where they stood. He turned to face her fully. That's the man you're marrying, Yara. A king who drowned his grief in blood, a monster wearing a crown. You're not a monster. You don't know what I am. Then show me. The words hung between them, charged with something dangerous. Torrin's eyes darkened. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. You should run, he murmured. Any sane person would. I've never been accused of sanity. Something broke in his expression. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and hungry and tasted like grief and loneliness and years of isolation finally crashing against something real. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his shirt. The storm raged outside, and inside, something equally wild was being unleashed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. This wasn't supposed to happen, he whispered. I know. I can't offer you love, Yara. I told you that. I know that too. But even as she said it, she felt the lie of it burning in her chest. Because somewhere in the past 2 weeks, somewhere between the training and the conversations and the quiet moments when he looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years, she had started to fall. And from the way his hands were trembling against her skin, she suspected he was falling too. Then the doors burst open. A wolf crashed through, shifting to human form mid-stride, his face white with terror. My king, he gasped. You need to come to the courtyard, now. What's happened? The messenger's eyes darted to Yara, then back to Torrin. It's the council, sire. They've invoked the old law. His voice broke. They're demanding the girl's execution. The courtyard was filled with wolves, not the quiet, deferential presence Yara had grown accustomed to over the past weeks. This was something else entirely. Hundreds of wolves in both forms, their eyes gleaming in the torchlight, their bodies tense with barely contained aggression. And at their center, Standing on a raised platform were 5 wolves in ceremonial robes. "The council," Torin said quietly as they approached. His hand was firm on her elbow, keeping her close. "They've been a thorn in my side since my grandfather's time." "What's the old law they mentioned?" "A remnant from darker days. It gives the council the right to demand the death of any wolf they deem a threat to the kingdom's survival." His mouth pressed into a thin line. "It hasn't been invoked in over a century." "And they're invoking it for me?" "They're trying." They reached the edge of the crowd, which parted before Torin like water before a blade. Yara felt every eye on her, sensed the mixture of curiosity and hostility radiating from the assembled wolves. Something wild ignited inside her, uneasy but no longer afraid. "Not anymore." The eldest council member, a gray-haired man with cold eyes and a mouth like a knife wound, stepped forward as they mounted the platform. "Alpha King," he said, his tone dripping with false respect. "We appreciate your swift response to our summons." "I wasn't aware the council had the authority to summon me." Torin's voice could have frozen fire. "In my own fortress, in the middle of the night." "Desperate times require desperate measures, sire." The councilman's gaze slid to Yara, contempt barely hidden beneath the formal veneer. "The girl is a threat. The council has voted unanimously to invoke the old law and demand her immediate execution." "On what grounds?" "She carries Varys blood." The councilman's lip curled. "Surely you of all people understand what that means. The prophecy," Torin cut in, "has been interpreted 1,000 different ways by 1,000 different scholars. It's hardly grounds for execution." "It was grounds enough for Senna." The name fell into the silence like a blade. Yara felt Torin go rigid beside her. His hand on her elbow tightened, not painfully, but with barely controlled tension. "Careful," he said softly. "You're treading on dangerous ground." "Am I?" The councilman smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "You brought another Varys into our midst, sire, after what happened last time. After everything we lost." He gestured broadly to the assembled wolves. "The people have a right to be concerned. The people have a right to justice, not fear-mongering from ambitious councilmen." "Then give them justice." The councilman's eyes glittered. "Submit the girl to the trial of blood. If she's truly not a threat, she'll survive. If she is..." He shrugged. "Problem solved." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Yara's inner wolf pressed against her control, sensing danger. "What's the trial of blood?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Torin's expression had gone carefully blank. "An ancient test. The accused is made to drink a silver-laced potion while their wolf is forcibly suppressed. If they survive until dawn, they're deemed innocent." "And if they don't?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "This is barbaric," Yara said, loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "You're condemning me based on my bloodline, not my actions. I haven't threatened anyone. I haven't hurt anyone. I didn't even know what I was until 2 weeks ago." "Ignorance is no defense against destiny." The councilman's voice was smooth, practiced. "The Varys bloodline carries destruction in its very nature. Your kind destroyed entire packs in the ancient wars, corrupted alphas, broke bloodlines that had stood for millennia. That was 300 years ago. I'm not responsible for what my ancestors did." "Perhaps not. But you carry their power." His eyes narrowed. "And power, in the wrong hands, is always dangerous." Yara opened her mouth to respond, but Torin stepped forward, placing himself between her and the council. "The girl is under my protection," he said, and his voice had changed, deeper, colder, carrying an authority that made even the hostile wolves in the crowd shrink back. "She came to Valdris as my guest and will soon be my wife. Any action against her is an action against the throne." "Even the throne is not above the old law, sire." But the councilman's confidence had wavered slightly. The council serves at my pleasure." Torin's eyes had begun to glow, a pale silver that was definitely not human. And my pleasure is that you stand down. Now. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Then the councilman smiled again, that same cold, knowing smile that sent revulsion through Yara. Very well, sire. We'll withdraw our demand. For now. He glanced at Yara with undisguised contempt. But the people will remember this. They'll remember that their king chose a Varys over his own kind. Get out, Torin said, each word sharp as cut glass. Before I forget that executing council members sets a bad precedent. The council withdrew, their robes sweeping across the stone as they descended from the platform. But as they passed, the eldest councilman paused beside Yara. You think he's protecting you, he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. But you don't know what he really is. Ask him about the curse, girl. Ask him what happens when an alpha king takes a mate. Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. What curse? They were back in Torin's study, the door locked, the fire burning low. Yara stood by the window, her arms wrapped around herself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Torin sat behind his desk, his head in his hands. He looked exhausted. More than that, he looked defeated. I should have told you sooner. Told me what? Silence stretched between them. When he finally looked up, his eyes held something she'd never seen there before. Fear. The Varys weren't just destroyed because of what they could do, he said slowly. They were destroyed because of what they'd done. Before the Purge, before the wars, the Varys ruled over all wolves. They were the original Alpha bloodline. I don't understand. My family, the line of Alpha Kings, we descend from a Varys who survived the Purge, a woman named Vela who was pregnant when her people were slaughtered. He stood, moving toward her. She cursed her own child as he was born, cursed the entire line that would follow him. Dread pooled in Yara's stomach. What kind of curse? The Alpha Kings cannot take mates. His voice dropped to barely a murmur. Every king who has tried has watched their mate die. Senna was just the latest in a long line of losses. But you said she was killed by conspirators. She was. But the curse made her vulnerable to that attack. Drew danger to her like a beacon. It works differently each time, but the result is always the same. His hands clenched at his sides. It draws death to any wolf who bonds with an Alpha King. Disease, accident, assassination. It doesn't matter how. The result is always the same. That's why you said you couldn't love me. Understanding crashed over her. That's why you wanted a marriage in name only. You were trying to protect me. I thought if I didn't bond with you, if I kept my distance, the curse wouldn't activate. His laugh was bitter, broken. I was a fool. The moment I started caring about you, I signed your death warrant. No. Yara stepped toward him. You don't know that. Don't I? He caught her shoulders, his grip desperate. The council's challenge tonight, that wasn't coincidence. The curse is already working. It's drawing threats to you, the same way it did with Senna. Then we'll fight it together. You can't fight a curse, Yara. Maybe not. She covered his hands with her own. But maybe I can break it. He went still. What? You said the curse was cast by a Varys, by Vela. She held his gaze. I'm Varys too. Maybe that means something. Or maybe it means you'll die faster. His voice splintered. I can't lose you, Yara. Not after everything. Not when I... He stopped himself, but she heard what he didn't say. When you what? She whispered. His forehead dropped to hers. His breath was warm against her lips. When I've finally found someone worth living for. The words broke something open inside her. She kissed him, soft and tender and full of everything they hadn't said. Then help me find a way to break it, she murmured against his mouth. Help me save us both. He pulled back, searching her face. Whatever he saw there seemed to steady him. There might be a way. he said slowly. The old texts speak of a ritual, something Viola created as a failsafe, in case a future Varys wanted to undo what she'd done. Where is it? In the Forbidden Archives, beneath the fortress. His expression hardened with determination. We'll go at dawn. Together. Together, Yara agreed. But as they stood there, holding on to each other in the flickering firelight, she couldn't shake the councilman's words from her mind. Ask him what he really is. She knew about the curse now. She knew about Senna. She knew about the prophecy. But something told her she still didn't know everything. And the truth, when it came, might be worse than anything she could imagine. The Forbidden Archives existed in the deepest part of the mountain. Yara followed Torrhen through passages that grew narrower and darker the further they descended. The air was thick with dust and age, carrying the scent of ancient paper and something else, something that made her wolf grow alert and watchful. Magic. Old magic. The kind that predated the kingdom itself. No one has been down here in decades, Torrhen said, his torch casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. My father forbade it after he lost my mother. He couldn't bear to look at the texts that might have saved her. Your mother died from the curse too. Every Alpha Queen has. His voice was flat, matter of fact, but she heard the pain beneath it. My grandmother, my great-grandmother, all the way back to Viola herself. They reached a door carved from solid obsidian, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. Torrhen pressed his palm against the center, and the symbols flared silver before the door swung inward. The chamber beyond was vast. Shelves stretched toward a ceiling lost in shadow, filled with books and scrolls and artifacts that hummed with dormant power. Crystal formations jutted from the walls, casting pale blue light across everything. The collected knowledge of the Varys, Torrhen murmured, everything that survived the purge. Yara moved deeper into the chamber, drawn by something she couldn't name. Her wolf had gone quiet, not with unease, but with attention, as if it recognized this place, as if it remembered. Where do we start? She asked. The ritual texts should be in the eastern alcove, Vela's personal writings. Torrhen moved toward the far end of the chamber. I'll search there. You look through the genealogies. There might be something about your bloodline that could help. They separated, each diving into the accumulated knowledge of a dead civilization. Hours passed. Yara's eyes burned from reading faded text, her fingers stained with ancient ink. She found records of various births and deaths, of powers manifested and bloodlines tracked, but nothing about her own heritage. Nothing about how a servant girl from Millbrook could carry the blood of wolves who died 3 centuries ago. Then she found the hidden compartment. It was in a book that looked like all the others, leather-bound, faded, unremarkable. But when she opened it, the pages were blank. All except one, which held a single phrase in handwriting she somehow recognized, for the daughter of my daughter's daughter, when she finally awakens. Yara's hands began to shake. She pressed her palm against the page and light erupted from the book, silver light that poured into her, through her, filling her with images and sensations and memories that weren't her own. A woman running through a burning forest, a baby clutched to her chest, a vow made in blood. My line will survive, whatever it takes. Generations of mothers passing the dormant wolf to their daughters, keeping it hidden, keeping it safe, waiting for the one who would finally be strong enough to awaken. Her mother's face, twisted with concentration as she suppressed her own wolf year after year, never shifting, never revealing what she was, protecting her daughter by hiding the truth. Her mother's last words, whispered as she died from the effort of containment. When you're ready, you'll understand. When you awaken, remember that I loved you. Yara gasped, the connection breaking. She was on her knees, tears streaming down her face, the book clutched against her chest. Yara! Torrhen was beside her instantly, his hands on her shoulders. What happened? What did you see? My mother, she choked out. She was Varys. She spent her whole life hiding it, suppressing her wolf so no one would know. She died protecting me. The servant records said she passed from a wasting illness. She wasted away from holding back her own nature. Yara looked up at him with burning eyes. She wasn't weak, Torrin. She was the strongest wolf who ever lived. And she sacrificed everything so I could survive long enough to awaken. Understanding dawned in his expression. That's why you shifted so late. Your wolf was sealed by your mother's power. When she died, the seal began to weaken. It just took years to break completely. There's more. Yara opened the book again, flipping to pages that were no longer blank. Text had appeared, written in that same familiar hand. My ancestor, the one who escaped the purge. She wasn't just any Varys. She was Vela's sister. Torrin went pale. What? Vela cursed your bloodline because her mate, the original Alpha King, betrayed her. He helped orchestrate the purge. He killed their children to prove his loyalty to the wolves who feared the Varys. Yara's voice shook as she read. But Vela's sister, Mira, was mated to a different wolf. A good one. He helped her escape, hid her among the common people, and their line survived in secret. You're not just Varys. Torrin's voice was barely audible. You're Vela's niece, her direct bloodline. And according to this, Yara held up the book. That means I can undo what she did. The curse was designed to be broken by a wolf of her blood, but only one who chose to love an Alpha King despite knowing the cost. Chose to love, Torrin repeated slowly. You knew about the curse before I realized I was falling for you? Yara smiled through her tears. Yes, I knew, and I stayed anyway. Wonder transformed his features, so raw and vulnerable it made her chest ache. There's a ritual, Yara continued. But it requires... The chamber door exploded inward. Wolves poured through the opening, a dozen at least, their eyes gleaming with hostile light. Behind them, walking with the calm certainty of someone who had already won, came the gray-haired councilman. How touching, he said. The cursed king and his doomed bride, playing at salvation. Torrin moved in front of Yara, his body coiling with lethal tension. Corvan, I should have known you'd be behind this. Behind what? The council's challenge? Corvan laughed. That was merely a distraction, boy. Something to keep you occupied while I secured what I actually came for. His eyes fixed on Yara with a hunger that sent revulsion through her. The Varys girl. Do you have any idea what her blood is worth? What it could do in the right hands? He spread his arms wide. I could remake the kingdom. Create a new bloodline of alpha wolves answering only to me. All I need is her, and all the heirs she can produce. You'll have to go through me, Torrin snarled. I was counting on it. Corvan's smile widened, and Yara saw the madness lurking behind his eyes. Did you really think the curse was Vela's doing alone? She cast it, yes, but I've been feeding it for generations. Every alpha queen who died, every mate who was taken before their time. He laughed at their expressions. My family has kept the curse alive, strengthened it, because a king without an heir is a king easily controlled. You killed Senna. Torrin's voice had gone deadly quiet. You killed my mother, my grandmother. I killed them all. Corvan's voice rang with pride. And now I'll kill you. Take your little Varys bride and finally claim what should have been mine from the beginning. He raised his hand. The wolves attacked. The battle was chaos. Torrin shifted faster than Yara had ever seen. One moment human, the next a massive black wolf with eyes like silver fire. He crashed into the attackers with devastating force, his jaws finding throats and his claws rending flesh. But there were too many. Yara dodged a wolf lunging for her throat, her own shift coming instinctively now. Her silver-gray form was smaller than the attackers, but faster. She wove between them, using their numbers against them, leading them into each other's paths. Still, they kept coming. She felt claws rake her flank, teeth snap at her legs, blood matted her fur. Across the chamber, Torin was fighting 3 wolves at once, his movements growing slower as wounds accumulated. They were losing. Enough! Corvan's voice cut through the snarls and crashes. He stood in the center of the chamber, a vial clutched in his hand, a vial filled with something that glowed sickly green. One more step, Alpha King, and I pour this down her throat. Silver and wolfsbane, concentrated enough to kill even Varys blood. Torin froze mid-lunge, shifting back to human form. Blood ran from a dozen wounds, but his eyes never left Corvan. Let her go. Beg me. Corvan's smile was cruel. Get on your knees and beg, and maybe I'll let her live long enough to serve her purpose. Yara, still in wolf form, watched Torin's face. She saw the moment he made his decision, the moment he began to lower himself to his knees. No, she wouldn't let him kneel. Not for her. Not for anyone. The book's words echoed in her mind. A wolf of her blood who chose to love despite knowing the cost. She understood now. The ritual wasn't about incantations or ceremonies. It was about sacrifice. About choosing love over self-preservation. About offering everything you had for someone who was worth it. Yara shifted to human form and stepped in front of Torin before he could complete his kneel. You want Varys blood? She said to Corvan. Here I am. Yara, no. Torin grabbed for her, but she was already moving. She didn't run toward Corvan. She ran toward the crystal formations jutting from the walls, the ones that hummed with old magic, with power that had been sleeping for 300 years. Her grandmother's words filled her mind. When you're ready, you'll understand. She understood. Yara slammed her palm against the largest crystal and poured everything she had into it. All her fear, all her love, all the power of a bloodline that had survived against impossible odds. The crystal blazed silver. Light exploded through the chamber. Pure, burning, ancient light that tore screams from the attacking wolves and drove Corvan to his knees. The vial fell from his hands, shattering on the stone floor. But Yara barely noticed. She was somewhere else now. Somewhere between the physical world and something deeper. She could see the curse wrapped around Torin like chains of ice, could see how it had bound his heart, choked his ability to love, drawn death to everyone who got too close. And she could see how to break it. Blood of my blood, she thought, reaching for those frozen chains. I claim him. I choose him. I love him. The chains shattered. Torin gasped, doubling over as 300 years of accumulated curse energy ripped free from his soul. Silver light poured from his eyes, his mouth, and his wounds. When it faded, he was on his knees, breathing hard, but whole. More than whole. For the first time since she'd known him, warmth radiated from his skin. The attacking wolves had fled. Only Corvan remained, cowering against the far wall, his face twisted with disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. The curse can't be broken. It's eternal. It was a mother's grief, Yara said, her voice echoing with power that wasn't entirely her own. And it's been answered by a daughter's love. She walked toward him, and with every step, she felt generations of Varys women walking with her. Her mother, her grandmother, all the daughters who had carried this burden in silence, waiting for the one who would finally end it. Vela cursed your line because she lost everyone she loved, Yara continued, but she left a way out. Not for revenge, but for redemption. She hoped that someday, a Varys would choose an Alpha King worthy of being saved. She stopped in front of Corvan, looking down at the wolf who had murdered queens and corrupted a kingdom for his own ambition. You don't get to decide who is worthy, she said. You don't get to control who lives and who dies. Not anymore. Please. The word came out broken. Please, I can give you power, wealth, anything you want. I want justice. Torin appeared beside her, fully healed, his eyes blazing with cold fury. You'll have it. He signaled, and wolves poured into the chamber. Loyal wolves, Yara realized, who had been waiting for their king's command. They surrounded Corvan, their expressions showing no mercy. For crimes against the crown, the murder of royal mates, conspiracy, and treason, Torin announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I sentence you to death. May whatever gods exist have more mercy than I do. Corvan's screams echoed through the ancient chamber as they dragged him away. Then there was silence. Yara swayed, exhaustion crashing over her now that the adrenaline was fading. Torin caught her before she could fall, pulling her against his chest with arms that were finally, blessedly warm. You broke it, he murmured against her hair. You actually broke the curse. I told you I would. You could have died. So could you. She pulled back to look at him. But we didn't. We survived. We survived, he repeated, as if testing the words. Then a smile broke across his face, not the controlled, careful expression she was used to, but something bright and open and full of wonder. I can feel it, Yara. The bond. The mate bond. She felt it too, a golden thread connecting her heart to his, warm and steady and unbreakable. I love you, she said. The words came easily now, without fear. I love you, Torin. I have for a while, I think. I was just afraid to say it. I love you too. He cradled her face in his hands. I've loved you since you stood in that courtyard and argued with me in front of my entire kingdom. Maybe even before that. Maybe from the moment you looked at me in that ravine and demanded answers instead of mercy. He kissed her, and it was nothing like before. This wasn't desperation or grief or borrowed time. This was beginning. This was forever. The wedding took place a month later. Valdris had never seen anything like it. Thousands of wolves gathered in the great courtyard, but this time they weren't kneeling in submission. They were celebrating, their howls rising toward the stars as their king finally took a queen who would survive to stand beside him. Yara wore silver, the color of her wolf, of her bloodline, of the power she now understood and controlled. A crown of white flowers rested on her head, and when she walked toward Torin at the altar, she felt her mother walking with her. I understand now, she thought. Thank you. The ceremony was simple, traditional. The words were ancient, but they felt new on her tongue when she spoke them. I claim you as mine, she said, looking into Torin's warm gray eyes. My mate, my husband, my king. I claim you as mine, he answered, and his voice held none of the cold distance it had carried when she first met him. My mate, my wife, my queen. The bond snapped fully into place, a connection so profound it stole her breath. She could feel his emotions now, his joy, his love, his fierce protectiveness, and she knew he could feel hers. The wolves howled their approval. Somewhere in the crowd, Yara caught a glimpse of Torin's advisors, the ones who had remained loyal through everything. She saw the wolves who had trained with her, who had watched her transform from a terrified runaway into the queen they now celebrated. And she saw, at the edge of the courtyard, a familiar silver-gray wolf watching with ancient eyes. Her wolf. Not the one beneath her skin, but something else. A manifestation, maybe, or a memory. Her mother's wolf, perhaps, or Vila's sister, or all the various women who had come before, here to witness the fulfillment of everything they had sacrificed for. The figure dipped its head once, acknowledgement and blessing combined. Then it faded into the moonlight. 3 years later, Yara stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over a kingdom transformed. The academy below was full of young wolves learning to control their abilities, common wolves and noble wolves alike, trained by teachers who had been persecuted a generation ago. Corvan's corruption had run deep, and it had taken time to root it all out. But they had succeeded. You're thinking too hard. Arms wrapped around her from behind, warm and strong. Torin rested his chin on her shoulder, following her gaze toward the academy. I'm thinking about how far we've come, she said softly. He pressed a kiss to her neck. I prefer thinking about how far we have to go, starting with our son's second birthday celebration, which you promised to help plan. Yara smiled, turning in his arms to face him. Behind her, in the nursery, their son Callum was sleeping peacefully, a child who would never know the curse, who would grow up loved and secure and free. I didn't promise to help plan, she corrected. I promised to supervise. Is there a difference? The difference is, I don't have to deal with the bakers arguing about cake flavors. He laughed, the sound still precious enough to make her heart skip. Torin laughed freely now, smiled without restraint, loved without fear. The curse was truly broken. I have something for you, he said, pulling back slightly. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box carved from obsidian. Yara opened it to find a ring, simple silver, set with a stone that glowed faintly blue. It's from the archives, Torin explained. It belonged to Vila's sister, to Mira. The records say she wore it when she escaped the purge, that it protected her through everything that came after. And you're giving it to me? It's always belonged to you. He took her hand, sliding the ring onto her finger. You're her heir, her legacy, the reason she survived it all. Yara looked at the ring, feeling the faint pulse of ancient magic. Not dangerous, not dark, just present. Watching over her the way her ancestors had always watched over their line. I love you, she said, the words as natural as breathing now. I love you too. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks and her lips. My impossible queen, my miracle, my everything. They stood together on the balcony as the sun set over their kingdom. Behind them, their son stirred in his sleep, making soft sounds of infant contentment. The prophecy had spoken of a Varys who would either save the Alpha bloodline or destroy it. Yara had done neither. She had transformed it, made it into something new, something better. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.